What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here with JaboctheGreat. Once again, we're back with the Last Word podcast. And as you can see, another weekend in football. This week, we got the divisional round in the NFL. Four pretty good games, starting with the Ravens and Texans. So this is a rematch from the first week of the season, actually. These two teams played each other. Probably not the most, exciting game offensively. Ravens ended up winning that one 25-9. But very obviously, these are not the same teams. And despite that, we will both be going with the same winner. Baltimore should get this one. Houston, I wouldn't say they shocked us last week, but I mean, they definitely surprised us with that victory. The way they won against the Browns. That ain't going to happen again this week. I'm saying it right now. Ravens, Texans should be a really good game. I think the offenses will probably go off, but I just don't see the Texans winning this one. I'll be really shocked if they end up winning this one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same scenario as last week for the Texans, right? Where they're playing an opponent who gave them a wallop in the regular season. And then, here's a chance to come back and give them what for. And obviously, DeMeco Ryans was really crafty in the way he dismantled the Browns' defense. The Ravens have another strong defense. I just don't see that happening here. I mean, the Texans are poised to have a great run. I think they'll make it a competitive game, probably better than the previous one for sure. But I mean, the Ravens have had time to rest up, get feeling a little better. That run game is going to be really hard to stop. Their defense is really good on all facets. I mean, they're going to get you in the secondary. They're going to get you up at the quarterback. I mean, it's not going to be an easy time. There's not many ways you can kind of toy with the Ravens defense to open up things for yourself if you're DeMeco Ryans this time. So I think it'll be a good game. And as my roommate has alluded to, despite the fact that the Ravens had a 0-yard performance last week, I don't think that'll matter. I think they will persevere. I do think that the rest is going to be big for this team. I think one of the biggest things we've seen with Baltimore is kind of the exhaustion and injury factor that happens with them. They've made it really far this season, and I think that rest is going to be pretty crucial in getting them kind of charged up. They've had 2 weeks of rest actually, so I think they'll be pretty good. And I think the Texans are it's an unfortunate matchup for them, but they've had a great run. I've been excited to see them on this run for sure. So to round out Saturday night, we'll have the other top seed in action with the 49ers against the Green Bay Packers. The Packers obviously put on a show to take down the Cowboys. We covered that here on this show. It was a crazy performance, and I do think there's a lot of narrative around the Packers here, Packers versus Niners, and of course now it's not Aaron Rodgers, and what's going to happen if Matt LaFleur is able to pull this off with Jordan Love and he didn't do it with Rodgers and all this kind of stuff. If you're going to ask us here on The Last Word, we're both going to agree that you don't have to worry about those stories. We think that the Niners are going to win this game. I think, again, this is a well-rested team, and this is sometimes rest can be pretty bad. But you have so much, same with the Ravens team, on this Niners team, that can go well on offense and defense, that a little bit of rest for these guys is probably going to be great because somebody's going to still be hot. You got Christian McCaffrey, you've got Brandon Ayuk, you've got George Kittle, you've got Brock Purdy, not to mention all the guys on defense. I think that the Packers are going to put up a fight, actually. I think it's going to be close. They've really come to life, and Jordan Love has played some really good football. I think they're better than their 9-8 record, but I don't think they're going to be able to overcome the hump that is the San Francisco 49ers. I think there's just too much going on offense and defense. And while the Niners do have some flaws that can be exploited, especially in a playoff environment, I think they're a little more kind of set in stone around their flaws than the Cowboys were. The Cowboys obviously kind of succumbed to each of their flaws in the previous game. I think the Niners, if they don't fall behind the Packers, and which is probably unlikely, that they'll be okay. So I'm going to take the Niners in this one.
Yeah, these two teams haven't played in a little bit. The last big matchup between them 2 years ago around this time, I think it was exactly the divisional round. Yeah. Packers, I should say, got a bye 2 years ago. That was Aaron's last playoff game. They had that game against the Niners where the offense basically was non-existent in this one. And I'm losing that. Also had, 100 players on the field goal team. So, yeah, even going back to the NFC Championship game a few years ago, 2019, 2020, where the Niners pretty much ran all over the Packers. I mean, you can even go back to, back when Cap was playing. I mean, they're not very happy memories for the Packers and Niners. And I think this one will definitely be a good matchup, but, kind of like the last game, Ravens Texans, there's a possibility, right? But I just don't see it happening in this one. I think with the Niners, what they saw last week, with the Packers and the Cowboys, like they obviously know we can't just sit here and underestimate them. Because I mean, even if the Packers had won like by 3-4 points or something like that, I mean that wouldn't have been as bad. But since they beat the crap out of the Cowboys, like Niners aren't going to sit here and take this one lightly. And I don't want to be here and sit here and say like, oh, we should just take the Packers and Texans just because they, had the upset last week and we would be foolish to pick against them. It's like objectively, Niners and the Ravens are the two best teams in their respective conferences. That's going to take over in this game. I think this is pretty obvious, right? But the only way I think the Niners end up losing this one is if they, for whatever reason, Brock Purdy has a game like he had, over that 3-game stretch, that losing stretch in the early parts of the season, throwing 3 picks or some crap like that. Like, I don't see the Packers coming out with the win in this one, but again, definitely should be a pretty good game. Then we're gonna move to the Lions and Buccaneers. This is another one where it's like, man, do you go with the hot hand, the team, that beat the piss out of the Eagles last week in a game that we hadn't covered it in depth, but there's really not much to say other than the Eagles look like they literally did not want to play football that night, and the Buccaneers made them pay for it. Or do you go with the team that had been pretty consistently good all year, won a close playoff game last week, their first one in 30 years? Is tough, but once again, we're both going with the favorites here, the Lions, the home team, with the dub. Now, these two teams actually played, again, earlier this season. They played about mid-October, I think it was. 20-6 victory, not really what we kind of expected from either team. That was when Tampa was on a little bit of a roll early on to start. And the Lions definitely were, until, the Ravens put them through the blender. But I definitely think this one, again, is not going to be the same situation here. I think it'll be higher scoring. But same result here. I think the Lions will probably get a win 27-20. My issue with the Bucks is just like I don't know what kind of team we're going to see, what kind of performance we're really going to see from them. Because we were talking about this beforehand. They have a good stretch early on, then they kind of fall off, then they get back up there. They won the division by literally beating us with 3 field goals. And our offense was so god awful that we did nothing as far as putting points on the board. So then they come out and then they beat the crap out of the Eagles. And it's like, I don't know what to expect. It's been a little bit more consistent from the Lions. So I think that'll end up prevailing here.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to consistency for me as well. This might be like a little interesting considering the game that we have left. But this is probably the hardest pick of this round, I think, because of the way that the Buccaneers heated up towards the end of the season, outside of the Saints and Panthers games towards the end. Their offenses looked really well. They've made some defenses hurt. Their defense is locked in. But the Lions have just been more consistent all season. Obviously, they finished with a much better record. And then when you look at their playoff games, though, the Lions barely survived the Packers after an uneventful second half. And the Buccaneers made short work of the Eagles. I think these two teams put themselves in to have a really classic matchup here. I think it's going to be a good game. But ultimately, yeah, I think that Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown are going to come together. I think that they're going to be a little more consistent. I think that their defense is going to be a little more locked in, and I think that their offense is going to be a little harder to stop than vice versa. So I think we'll see probably another narrow victory for the Lions, but I do think that they're going to pick themselves a ticket to the NFC Championship in this one. And so to round that out, we have probably the biggest story of this thing. I mean, obviously coming into this week, we had the Stafford story last week. If the Browns would have won, we would have had Flacco going over to Baltimore. Instead, what we finally get is that Patrick Mahomes has to play a playoff game away from Arrowhead, and it is in Buffalo. So there's no better place it could be when you consider all the stuff that these two teams have been through the past few years against each other. Buffalo's constant trip-ups when they go to Arrowhead and just fall short through some small tomfoolery. Now they get to host the Kansas City Chiefs, and that could be a big difference maker. And as far as Terrence and I are concerned, we do believe that it will be Maybe the reasoning isn't entirely that they're in Buffalo, but we do think that will make somewhat of a difference here, and we're going to both take the Bills in this one. The Bills have been the better team all season, and that includes the rough patch for the Bills for me. I just think that the Chiefs have had some luckier wins. They've had some none of the Chiefs wins have been bad wins really. A win is a win, but they've had some more inconsistencies on offense, and those inconsistencies were gone in that playoff game against Miami. But they also faced a Miami and frigid temperatures in Arrowhead, who that's just like everything about that is going to go wrong. The Bills have had, especially towards the end of the season, a much more consistent offense, a really strong defense. They've been good on special teams. They've got a kicker that makes them dangerous from really long range. I don't think this will be a blowout by any means, and the Chiefs could very easily sway this from one good play. But I think that the Bills have a great shot here to take this game and with themselves a ticket to the AFC Championship. I think it's going to be fun. I think this is great that it's the last game. The 6:30 time is kind of weird compared to the other games. But, I think this is going to be a good game. It's a good way to end off the divisional round and see who's going to be facing, me and Terrence would think, the Ravens for the championship, for the AFC Championship. So this is probably one of the best matchups we could get. I did not want the Chiefs to move forward from the last round, but I am happy to see this Bills-Chiefs rivalry kind of culminate here at a matchup in Buffalo with yet another potential AFC title on the line.
Considering the Panthers are sitting at home, they have been for the past 5 years. I don't really care who wins anymore. But um, yeah, you said it right. We're both picking the Chiefs. Excuse me, both picking the Bills. Usually, I was about to say, usually I would not bet against Mahomes and the Chiefs, but I feel like the Bills are kind of finally due. Obviously, they've been able to beat them in the regular season consistently, but once they get to playoff time, the AFC Championship game about 3-4 years back, obviously the overtime game a couple years ago, it's just for whatever reason they can't beat them. And maybe I think it probably will make a difference now that they're in Buffalo, but it's not like all of a sudden Patrick Mahomes is going to come out here and play like complete garbage because now he's on the road. He has to play a road game for the first time in the playoffs outside of the Super Bowl. Like, no, he'll still be fine. But I think last week, I mean, they Miami never really had much of a chance. It seemed like, but I don't think the Chiefs, to be honest with you, are simply that good this year. Like they might surprise me and win this game, but based off of the Bills game, like I know it's regular season, they hadn't been beating them in the regular season, but that's the type of game that the Chiefs usually would win. Like the Dolphins, they clearly weren't as good as we thought they were. Chiefs were able to pretty much handle them. You're not going to be able to do that against the Bills. And even though the Bills might have won with some questionable tactics last week, like they were supposed to beat the Steelers. Like that wasn't a surprise. So yeah, right now I think it's pretty obvious. Ever since that win by Buffalo, Bills have been the better team. That should be the case in this one. I think this one will come down to a 28-24 win, last drive kind of thing. Last minute Bills, Josh Allen drives them down the field, gets a touchdown to win. What we've usually come to expect from Patrick Mahomes. I think it'll be a flip side. I think in this one, this is really when you're going to start to see more of the issues with the Chiefs receivers. The discrepancy between the Chiefs receivers and the Bills receivers, their weapons. I think that one's really going to come out, and that's really going to be exasperated in this game. So, yeah, I'll go with the Bills. Wouldn't shock me if the Chiefs win, but that's just me not wanting to really bet against Mahomes because usually it seems like whenever we bet against certain teams, we get it wrong. But I don't think we'll get this one wrong. Bills finally get the Chiefs out of there in the playoffs.